and welcome back to my channel, where I'm going to cover the Paladin's Oath of the Watcher's class specialization from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, providing a brief description of the subclass, as well as explain and set up the various features gained. The Paladins who follow this oath are trained to protect worlds from creatures from other planes of existence, much like the Ranger's Horizon Walker subclass. In fact, this class specialization is an excellent class to take if there are going to be others in the party who make use of the subclasses that deal with the various planes. However, the Paladins, while acting as protectors, also work on building up their own network of informants they can use to keep an eye on all things extraplanar. This network is used to guide the Paladins of this class specialization on where they need to go to deal with those issues. Much like all of the Paladins we've covered thus far, they are built to do this in a way that leaves no stones unturned. As I have said before, the Paladin will have to wait until level 3 to be able to select their oath, and this is so that the DM can observe how they treat the oath they intend to take. I will usually make a player who is using a Paladin character to tell me what oath they will be choosing at the time they create their character. This is so that I can monitor that character and determine if the player is sticking to the tenets of the Paladin's oath, so that I can intervene if required. To better understand how that will work, I recommend you watch some of the other videos I've created around the base Paladin class and some of its subclasses, and I will be sure to place links in the description below so that you can very quickly access them. However, before we start looking at the tenets and the other features, let's go ahead and level up our Paladin to level 3. And in this case, we want to select Oath of the Watchers. The first feature your character is going to acquire is their tenet, and this is what your character is going to have to stand by and swear to in order to remain a part of this particular subclass. In this case, it is the tenets of the Watchers, and they're just as strict as the other oaths, in that these Paladins must be vigilant, disciplined, and loyal, and anyone who steps outside of those tenets will most likely break their oath. A DM is going to take note of these tenets and will most likely pay close attention to how you play your character, as well as to what you have your character do, in case it might violate one of these tenets. Failing or misrepresenting one of these tenets will potentially trigger subsequent events that might determine your Paladin's right to remain within the subclass, or be rejected and become an Oathbreaker. And once again, I've discussed how this process works in other videos, so I won't repeat that here. I do, however, recommend that you look at the videos that I've linked in the description below to gain an understanding as to how that process does work. Another feature your character will gain is called the Oath spells for the Watcher class, and these are the list of spells your character will gain at specific levels, and they will not count against your list of prepared spells that you yourself have to select. Initially, your character is going to acquire the Alarm and Detect magic spells, but at levels 5, 9, 13, and 17, your character will gain 2 additional spells at each of those levels. And to help keep these spells separate from your own selected list of spells, the best way to approach this is to create a new spell group that these spells will be members of. To do that, I'm simply going to initially drag Alarm onto our Actions tab here. This is initially going to add the Alarm spell to the General Spells Level 1 spell group that you get when you add other spells to your character sheet. We want to modify this to actually be Oath spells. And we do that simply by changing its group. And as we can see, we now have a new group here. The one thing I've noticed is that it doesn't have the level 1 bracket there, and that is because this isn't a spell group yet, it is a power group. To change that back to a spell group, click on this magnifying glass here. You will get this group type option that currently is set to abilities. You just click that and set it to spells. We also want to go ahead and preset this to be charisma, and because base is already going to be set up to follow along with what this ability is used for, we don't necessarily have to modify this. I know I have done it in the past. You can actually just leave this as is. Now all we have to do is drag in Detect Magic, and drop that into place. It will automatically be added to this spell group. And just for the purposes of being complete and ready for this, we go ahead and set them prepared. And again, these do not count against your prepared spells list. And the only reason we are setting these to actually be prepared is simply because sometimes when you're under the Combat and Actions group, if you don't have a spell prepared, it won't show up. The other thing that we gain as a benefit, because these are both spell groups, is that when you use up all of your spell slots for a given level, the spells of that level, if they can't be cast at a higher level, go away. They're not permanently gone, they're just temporarily disabled until you reacquire additional spell slots, and you'd get that by completing a long rest. But that is all discussed in the base Paladin class, so I'm not going to discuss that here. The final feature your character gains at level 3 is called Channel Divinity Watcher, which grants you 2 new divine options your character can make use of that link directly to your Channel Divinity feature, which is explained by the Sacred Oath feature in the base Paladin class, but is granted to you by this feature. In this case, your character will now be able to make use of the Watcher's Will and Abjure the Extraplanar options, each of which we will explain in a moment. The first thing I want to do is prepare the power group we will need for these options to be useful. I do that simply by dragging this Channel Divinity feature over onto our character's action sheet and not drop it into a spell group. I am then going to switch this to the group mode, or the display for groups, and I'm also going to call this Channel Divinity. And the reason why I've done this is it now creates a power group called Channel Divinity. With this group now created, we need to modify it slightly. We need to ensure that it uses Charisma as our base, because all of the features that you're going to use from Channel Divinity for the Paladin require your Charisma skill, or make use of your Charisma skills. Additionally, we want to make sure that we set this to 1 rest, because Paladins only get 1 use of their Channel Divinity feature before it's used up, but do gain the ability to regain those uses during a short rest, as well as a long rest. And beyond that, we have essentially completed setting up this power group. So this feature is actually set up already to deal with the Abjure the Extraplanar options. We're going to temporarily ignore that and simply drag and drop another copy of this into place. In this case, I'm going to update it to be Watcher's Will for its description. And that will drop it down to here. With the Watcher's Will option, you now have the means to provide advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws to anyone who is within 30 feet of your character. It works much like an aura, but in this case you're selectively choosing who can receive this benefit, and the number of creatures you provide this bonus to cannot exceed your charisma modifier in number. For example, if your character's charisma modifier is +2, then you can select only 2 party members or allies to grant the advantage rolls on. And this is in addition to your own character, meaning that you have a total of 3 characters that you can grant that to. However, you cannot change it from your own character. It's going to be yourself and then 2 others is the way it works. The duration will last for 1 minute or a total of 10 turns, and requires you to use an action in order to activate this option. However, because this is linked to your Channel Divinity option, once it's used, you will not be able to use it again until you complete a short or long rest. Now, we'd already gone and set this up so that we had the ability to go ahead and configure Watcher's Will for ourselves. However, we still have the old effects in place. These aren't going to work, not for Watcher's Will. So we're going to delete these from this subgroup and then go ahead and create a new effect. We want to call this Watcher's Will, semicolon, and it's going to be ADV SAV because we're dealing with saving throws, and we are dealing with 3 of our stats: intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. You can just copy and paste those from another location if you want, doesn't much matter, or you can type them in. It really won't matter. I recommend you keep the words, though, in lowercase. It's also going to last for 1 minute, and because this can be placed on any target that you want to grant this to, you don't need to set it to self. So the way this is going to work inside of a advanced combat or advanced situational scenario is simply as follows. As long as you and the affected characters that you're planning on granting this particular set of abilities to is in the combat tracker, you'll be able to drag and drop the effect into place relatively easily. And in fact, when you declare that you're going to be using this particular Channel Divinity option here, what you will do is you will initially grant it to yourself, but then you will grant it on up to, in this particular character's case, +1 additional characters that you have chosen. In this case, I'm choosing this ape. If you have a +2, you would add it to 2 characters. If you have a +3, you would add it to 3 characters, etc., etc., etc. Now, the way that this is going to work is for the next 60 seconds, or the duration of 10 turns, whenever your character has to make a saving throw that requires intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, you will be able to do so with advantage, which is very beneficial for this character because they have a -2 in their intelligence for their saving throw. So there's a greater chance now that they will succeed. So as long as you're within that 60-second period or the duration of 10 turns, then the advantage sticks around. When you eventually cycle past those 10 turns, then these will go away and expire. With the Abjure Extraplanar option, your character is gaining the ability to turn different classes of extraplanar creatures, much like a cleric can turn the undead. Any Fey, Aberration, Elemental, Celestial, or Fiend within 30 feet of your character will be required to make a Wisdom-based saving throw, equaling or exceeding the total of your character's Wisdom modifier, +8, plus your character's proficiency bonus, or be turned for 1 minute or until they take damage. Additionally, they must be able to hear your character, and your character must present their holy symbol in order for this to be able to trigger that saving throw. There is no limit to the number of creatures your character can turn, so if there are 50 creatures crammed into that 30-foot radius around your character, then all 50 would be required to make that saving throw. Any creature that fails their saving throw must spend their time getting as far away from your character as they possibly can, and will be restricted to only using the dash action for their main action if they're able to move away from you. Any creature that is essentially blocked from being able to move away from you will be able to use a dodge action or try to remove the effect that is preventing them from running. So if they have a hold creature on them, and yet you've now turned them, they will attempt to break away from that hold creature so that they can continue to run away from you. The turning gives them a greater fear of your character than that of being held. But the good news for us is this is mostly set up. We already have the turned effect here. The only thing that's a little off is this Wisdom saving throw. I'm just going to pop that open so that it corrects itself. Once again, this is used as an action, and once used, you must be able to complete a short or a long rest to be able to regain the use of your Channel Divinity feature, as I stated earlier. The last thing I want to do, though, is make sure that this is set up to match the feature or option that we're getting from this skill. So Abjure the Extraplanar. And apparently something just fell on the floor behind me. Now, the way this is going to work is as follows. The only creature in our combat tracker right now that would be affected by this particular option is this Mind Flayer, because they're an aberration. So what you would do is you would essentially target that aberration as such, and then execute Abjure the Extraplanar. And you do that by forcing that Mind Flayer to make a saving throw. Now, they have advantage on things like that, and in this case, they succeeded, so they're not going to be able to get turned. But let's say that they failed. Well, what would then happen is you would apply the turned effect, and for the next 10 rounds, their sole goal in life is to get as far away from your character as they possibly can. The last thing that I want to point out, though, is because both of these features are grouped in this one group that has a grouped or linked uses indicator here, whenever you use any one of these features, the other one becomes unavailable. So if you'd used Watcher's Will, then you wouldn't be able to use Abjure the Extraplanar until you completed the short rest. If you used Abjure the Extraplanar, you wouldn't be able to use Watcher's Will until you completed that short rest or long rest. At Paladin level 5, you're gaining your next set of Oath spells. I'm going to just quickly add them to our character sheet by expanding out the Oath spells level 1, and then dragging Moonbeam and See Invisibility on top of that particular group. And what you will see is that it will have actually created a brand new spell group here. And the reason we wanted this to be a separate spell group from this particular spell group is because this is now linked. You will see that if I were to set this to strength, and then I opened up this option here, which unfortunately you can't have two windows open, so to show you that it opened it, you will see that it also now has strength here. If I set this back to base, which will take a moment, there we go, and I go ahead and open this back up, you will see that it's back to base. That's why we want this to be a spell group. In addition to that, it also makes sure that when we actually use up one of our spell slots, all the affected spells go away when we've used out, like i.e. these second level spells, for example. All second level spells will go away when we're in our combat and actions group if we don't have any second level spell slots. So you can see how they come back and then they go away. Come back, go away, that kind of thing. Now, the last thing I want to do is make sure that Moonbeam and See Invisibility are prepared. And again, it didn't affect them in this particular case because they were there when we were in our combat mode, even if they were unprepared. But generally, you want to set them prepared. They're not going to count against your list of prepared spells, so there's no impact to you if you set them prepared. All it does is it guarantees that they'll show up when you're in your combat and actions mode. That's it. At Paladin level 7, your character will now gain the Aura of the Sentinel feature that allows your character to boost the initiative rolls of all creatures of your choice that are within 10 feet of your character by your character's own proficiency bonus. Now, by the time your character reaches level 7, they will have had a proficiency increase of +1, so they're now at a +3 total. In fact, all characters at level 7 will have a +3 proficiency bonus here. What that means is that we need to find a way to grant our character the ability to grant others benefits to their initiative roll. Well, that's not that hard to do, and we'll get to that in a moment. First, I need to clarify a few points about this feature. Now, the point that I want to make is that this is going to affect any creature's initiative roll that you're granting the ability of your extra proficiency bonus for them to be able to make use of, as long as they're within 10 feet of your character. But here's the thing. It's going to affect every initiative roll if they're within that range. Your aura is always going to be there. It's a passive capability. So if they start combat inside of your aura, roll their initiatives, then move out, but return before the end of the turn, and if the Dungeon Master is re-rolling initiative rolls at the end of each turn, you will still gain that benefit, as well as any character you've given that particular benefit to. You may even be able to switch it up if you wish. It's entirely up to you. So now that I've clarified that, let's go ahead and add this to our character's action sheet. Now this is going to be a brand new group, and that's because this is the first feature we're adding that actually belongs outside of the Channel Divinity or a spells group. So I'm going to call this Oath of the Watchers, provided I spelled it. Hey, I got it right. And then I'm going to add an effect. And what this effect is going to do is it's going to be called Aura of the Sentinel, semicolon, and it's going to grant a bonus to initiative based off of your proficiency bonus. Oops, that's a square bracket, PRF, close square bracket. So it's Aura of the Sentinel, semicolon, INIT, colon, space, a square bracket, and that is an opening square bracket, PRF, and then a closing square bracket. It's going to expire on the next roll, and you will drag and drop this onto any and all characters who happen to be within 10 feet of your character before they roll their initiative. So I've gone ahead and cleared out all of the initiative rolls that had been previously set for all of the creatures and characters within this combat tracker. Our Dungeon Master is calling for initiative. That means we're about to roll our character's initiative using this option here. What I want to do is ensure that Aura of the Sentinel is on any and all creature who is starting within that particular aura itself, within 10 feet of my character. And let's say the ape one is actually within 10 feet. Well, the way this will now work is that once that feature is there and the Dungeon Master either rolls for initiative or you yourself roll for initiative, I'm just going to roll all initiatives here, you will see that the Paladin and the ape both got bonuses to their initiative roll. So they had a +3 bonus applied. And then both of those expired. And this is only because there's no guarantee that ape is always going to be there. In theory, you could leave it permanently on your character, but there really isn't the point. In this case, it's best to actually go through and let it expire and then reapply it each time a new initiative is required. Now, initially, the range is 10 feet. But the good news for your character is at level 18, it will increase to 30 feet. And we'll show you how to do that a little bit later. The one thing I want to do to actually help you as a player out is always put the range of that particular spell in brackets after the name of the spell, because this will tell you right away it has a range of 10. As long as you understand that a bracket 10 bracket means range. At character levels 9 and 13, your character is going to acquire their next set of spells. So what I'm going to do is expand out Oath Spells level 2, drag the spells that I'm gaining at 9th level, and drop those into place. I'm then going to very quickly increase this particular character's level up to 13 because there is nothing else we do between 9 and 13. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in the other 2 spells we get. And that sets up our level 3 and level 4 spell groups. At Paladin level 15, your character will gain the Vigilant Rebuke feature, which allows your character to use their reaction to do 2d8 plus your character's charisma modifier of damage to any creature that forced any other creature within 30 feet of your character and is visible to your character to make an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma-based saving throw. The only condition is that the creature making the roll must succeed on that roll in order for your character to be able to use this reaction, and there is no attack roll required by your character to determine if your character hits. As this is a reaction, it means that your character will only be able to do this once per turn, and they won't have a reaction that they will be able to use anywhere else within that turn. It also means that you don't have to pre-plan what you will be using this feature for as a reaction. This feature itself is giving you the ability to use it as required. Thus, you do not need to tell the DM that you intend to use this reaction in the event of. You simply react to the forced save and the subsequent successful roll against it to be able to activate this feature, meaning that you do not have to start your turn stating, hey DM, I'm going to use this feature as a reaction if something like this, blah, 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 happens to happen. So for example, I'm going to have the Mind Flayer in this particular combat scenario attack the ape with a required wisdom-based saving throw. So in this particular case, our ape has advantage. Now in this case, they failed, which means we would not be able to use our reactions. However, let's, for the sake of argument and demonstration, say that they actually succeeded. So the ape instead succeeds against this particular saving throw. Now the way that this would work is that you would make use of your reaction, which we haven't set up here yet, and apply that damage effect directly to the Mind Flayer. There's no attack roll required, you just simply drag and drop it into place. So let's go ahead and set this up so that you can see how that part of it actually works. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag Vigilant Rebuke onto our character's actions sheet outside of one of these spell groups, otherwise it will get confused. I'm then going to copy the Oath of the Watcher's power group here and make sure that this particular feature gets added into that group. Now what I want to do is set up what's called a damage roll. So I want to add a damage effect. All I did is I right-clicked on the title here, clicked this add action, and then selected this add damage icon. Make sure that I expand out a new line here, and it's 2d8 plus your character's charisma modifier. So we want 2 dice of 1d8s each. Drop that into place, and all I did is I left-clicked, dragged it out, right-clicked once to get that extra dice, and dropped it into that little square. Next, we want to set it up so that we gain our charisma modifier here. Now, unfortunately, there's only a +1 point for this particular character. Don't ask. But anyway, it's ready to go. So, if we continue our scenario where the Mind Flayer had triggered the saving throw, and instead of the ape failing, they had succeeded, you, as part of your reaction, would simply do this. It would roll the damage and apply the damage effect directly onto the Mind Flayer. There is no attack roll required, as I've already stated. You just simply drag and drop the damage. At Paladin level 17, we are gaining our last 2 Oath spells. So I'm going to quickly just expand out this level 4 group and drag our level 5 spells into place. Now we have all of these spells. The one thing I didn't do was go through and prepare them all. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just make sure you do that as you continue to move forward on gaining all of these particular spells. At level 18, you're going to have a range increase for Aura of the Sentinel, so you're going to want to be sure that you will update its description from 10 to 30 feet. This means that it will now apply to any creature that you wish to grant this to who happens to be within 30 feet of your character, not just 10 feet. And finally, at Paladin level 20, your character will gain their last feature called Mortal Bulwark, which grants your character a couple of benefits for a period of 1 minute or roughly 10 turns. The first benefit that they're going to gain is the means to use True Sight for a distance of 120 feet. So before I move on to the next benefit you're going to gain, let's go ahead and set that up, because this is something we can now set up on our action sheet, and you don't have to rely on the Dungeon Master to do it all the time. And it will only work when you're in a map, in reference to Fantasy Grounds anyway. So by default, there is this wisdom saving throw, or sorry, charisma-based saving throw, but that's for a little bit further on down that we'll get to. What we first want to do is add a new effect here and set this up to have a 1 minute duration. We want to call this Mortal Bulwark. Oops. My ability to type is slowly fading. And then we simply want to set this up to use one of the newest features that Fantasy Grounds has added at the time of this recording anyway, is the vision feature. And we set it out to a range of 120 feet, and we set it to make sure that it uses the true sight effect, if you will. And this guarantees that when your character is on a map and you make use of this mortal bulwark for that 1 minute period, which by the way, it only applies to yourself, your character will see in true sight as if they were outside and you're underground. So what I mean by that is that if you're in a cave and there's absolutely no lighting at all, you can activate this feature and you will see as if you were standing outside. So that takes care of that particular benefit. The next benefit is that anytime your character attacks a Fey, Aberration, Elemental, Celestial, or Fiend-based creature, your character will gain advantage on that attack roll. Well, how do you tell Fantasy Grounds how to distinguish that? It's a little easier than you might think. We want to go ahead and add another effect to this particular feature. And in this case, it's just simply going to be a blank effect once again. This will also be called Mortal Bulwark. See if I can do better spelling it this time. I still didn't get it right in the first one. Wow. All right. I got to modify this. Bulwark. Yoink. There we go. Now, back to this one. Semicolon. It will also have a duration of 1 minute. It will also be on yourself and only yourself. But what we want to do is something like this. IFT : so if target is of type Aberration, Celestial, Elemental, Fey, or Fiend, roll your attack with advantage. And the syntax is IFT : space type, all in capital letters, open bracket, and it's the round bracket, your list of creature types, close it with a round bracket, semicolon, and then your effect, which in this case is attack, ADV, ATK, for attacking with advantage. Now, the third benefit directly relates to whether you actually hit with your attack from the previous benefit that you have acquired. And what I mean by that is that if you attack one of those creatures and connect, and specifically it's the Aberration, Celestial, Elemental, Fey, or Fiend-based creatures, and actually hit with that attack, you will force them to make a Charisma-based saving throw or be banished back to their home plane, if you're not already on their home plane. This means that if they fail their saving throw and your character attacked them while they were on the material plane, let's say, for example, Forgotten Realms, but they were from the Abyss, then they would get banished back to the Abyss for a period of 100 years, though it might differ for other worlds depending on the rules that that particular world has defined for banishment. If, however, they manage to succeed on that particular saving throw, they will remain, and the attempt to banish them via this method again cannot be used for a period of 24 hours. But other attempts to banish them can still be used. There's no limitation to, say, having a banishment spell subsequently cast by a wizard or a cleric if they have that capability. Can't remember which of the two has it. I think it's the cleric. But anyway, that banishment spell will be another attempt against that particular creature. It's just your own feature that you can't use again for a period of 24 hours in the event of actually going through and trying to trigger another banishment. You can still attack them and gain that advantage. It's just the banishment functionality that won't apply. Now, if you were to attack that very same creature, but you yourself are in the Abyss this time, and you're on their specific level of the Abyss that is considered their home plane, and you made that attack roll and forced that particular Charisma saving throw, it would have no effect, because they're already on their home plane. Now, this feature can be used as a bonus action, but you won't be able to use it again until your character expends an unused 5th level spell slot or they complete a long rest. So, at level 20, your character is going to have a total of 2 5th level spell slots, which means you could theoretically, if you don't cast any 5th level spells at all, make use of this feature 3 times, giving you 3 full minutes or 30 full rounds of this feature over the course of a day. And because it requires a long rest, as does recovery of your spell slots requiring a long rest, it would be a full day or a full period before you can actually go through and regain those spent uses and those spent spell slots. Now, you may have noticed I kind of skipped over setting up that third aspect of this particular feature, and that's because the Charisma-based saving throw is already there. It's slightly incorrect. It should be against that, but otherwise, the effect is there. You just simply have to open up this magnifying glass to correct the stat, and once you do that, you're good to go. So I've gone ahead and set things up, and let's say that the Mind Flayer has an entirely different world or plane of existence that they have come from. They're not from the material plane, although there are some that are in the material plane. And let's say that your Paladin is going to go ahead and attack them. We've already got them targeted, so we don't need to do that again. But what we can do is make an attack with advantage on that particular creature. So we need to ensure that we add this particular effect here. And it's going to go on ourselves. And the reason for this is it's our target that it's going to compare against, not their target that they have in relation to this particular feature. Now that I have this creature targeted, I'm going to go ahead and make my attack roll. And in this case, I'm just going to simply use the longsword. And you'll see that it's rolled twice, and that this dice is green, and that there's an ADV, or our advantage indicator, here inside of this particular stat block, if you will. I've hit, which means I can now roll my damage. On top of that, because I have hit, I can now force that Mind Flayer to make a charisma-based saving throw. They failed. And if they aren't in their home plane, they are now officially banished and they are taken completely out of combat. This could really screw over a Dungeon Master's whole combat scenario that they might have in mind. If you're going after the main boss and that main boss isn't of this plane and doesn't have any particular resistance to being banished, then they would have just been banished, thus ending the whole combat encounter if they were the only combat object inside of the combat tracker. So you could really shorten an entire combat scenario for the benefit to the party, but to tick off the DM in a very quick period of time. Now, in relation to the vision effect here, all you have to do is add that to your character sheet, and if you expand out the effects icon here, you'll see all of the individual effects that you have in place. I can get rid of that for now. So these two come directly from this particular feature. While you're within a map-based system, your character will see for up to 10 turns or for 1 minute, and with True Sight, as opposed to, let's say, Dark Vision if they had Dark Vision, or Blind Sight if they had Blind Sight, which this character does not. I think they don't have any vision at all, so they can see nothing in the darkness. But that completes the setup that we have to deal with when it comes to this particular Paladin. And the Paladins of this subclass would work quite well with the Ranger's Horizon Walker subclass, as I've already stated earlier, as it essentially complements the abilities of the Ranger with some pretty capable ones from the Paladin. However, I can only see this character's capabilities being used to their full capacity, if you will, in campaigns that deal almost exclusively with the planes of existence, or more specifically with the creatures from those planes that match the types this particular Paladin is trained to defend against. However, this does bring us to the end of this video. I hope you found it useful and informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.